Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the book of Ezra in our continuing survey of Old Testament literature and theology. The authorship of Ezra, we're not told. He's not named. It is a sequel to First and Second Chronicles, so if you can figure out who wrote First and Second Chronicles, it's possible you can figure out Ezra. The last two or three verses of Second Chronicles are identical to the opening verses of the book of Ezra. It's found in the Hebrew Bible as one book with Nehemiah. So you've got Ezra and Nehemiah are sort of joined at the hip, almost like a part one, part two. I think similar to the way First and Second Samuel are part one and part two. It's you have Zerubbabel's narrative. That's the first half of the book of Ezra, chapters 1 through 6. The rest of the book of Ezra is Ezra's narrative, his story. That starts 150 years later. And then 10 years after that, you've got Nehemiah's narrative. So it's really three stories wrapped into one, or in our English Bibles, two books. There's sections written in Aramaic, chapter 4 to 8, all the way to chapter 6, verse 18, and also chapter 7, verses 12 through 26. Part of that, at least, and that's probably what kicked it off, is when you have certain decrees that are coming from the royal court in Persia. It's not giving it in Persian, it's giving it in Aramaic, which was the common language, at least in the west side of the Persian Empire. And so, just like the book of Daniel does the same thing, Daniel chapter 2 and verse 4 switches over to Aramaic when the decree starts, and same thing happens here. So we have already looked at Babylon and the Medes and the Persians, and how the Medes and the Persians, and actually they'd been combined into one group. They were two different people groups, but combined into one group. The story says that Cyrus, his mother was a Persian, his father was a Mede. I'm sorry, other way around. His mother was a Mede, his father was a Persian. Great story. I'm not sure if it's true, but I wish it was. He goes to war against the Lydians. Actually, the Lydians had tried to attack him, and he goes all the way to Sardis. That's a great story, and I'm not going to tell it now. But if you see one of my videos, maybe dealing with Revelation chapter 3, don't miss that story with Croesus and Cyrus. Great story. But then after that, he comes up against Babylon, and there's a few different accounts, but the account that he gives, and we've got the inscription where he talks about he comes to Babylon, and they open the city gates, and he just walks in without a fight. Now, maybe it was a little bit more involved with that, but that's how he tells the story. So I'm going to stick with that. Ezra chapter 1, verse 1. Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, and hadn't just become king of Persia, he'd already been that, but now he has combined the empire together into Persia and the Medes and the kingdom of Croesus in Sardis, and now Babylon. In order to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah. And he's speaking of Jeremiah chapter 25, verses 1 through 12, also Jeremiah 29:10, things that speak about how the Jewish people would eventually come back to the land, rebuild their land, and rebuild their temple. And that's what's going to happen here. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing. And now we're going to read this proclamation. Notice, the Lord stirred up the spirit, according to this decree. So this is, yes, Cyrus is exercising his own free will, but this is the Lord dictating what he's going to do. Verse 2, thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem. Now, there'd already been a house in Jerusalem. There'd been a temple, but that had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And so this is going to be a rebuilding. Notice, which is in Judah. Whoever there is among you of all his people, may his God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. And you look at this and you say, oh my goodness, Cyrus has become a Christian. Verse 4, every survivor at whatever place he may live, let the men of that place support him with silver and gold, with goods and cattle, together with a freewill offering for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. Now, not every Jew is going to go. Most people are going to stay behind and just stay where they're at. They've been relocated to the east. They've been there now for a few generations, and frankly, that's a long trip to go back to. But like I said, it sounds like Cyrus is a Christian, and we would think so were it not for a different inscription that we have found. This is known as the Cyrus cylinder, and Cyrus basically says the same thing. What he says to the Jewish people, he says to other groups as well. Your God picked me, and here I am now. I'm actually king of the universe, king of all the nations, and therefore your God put me in place, and he's really cool, and he says that I'm really cool, and so go back and rebuild your temples, rebuild your cities. Don't forget to send me your taxes. Welcome to the Persian Empire. You see, Cyrus had built himself as not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, and it worked. It was hugely successful as people go back to their homes, but now they're going to remain faithful, for the most part, to the Persian Empire under Cyrus. Verse 5, then the heads of the fathers' households of Judah and Benjamin. Remember, Judah and Benjamin, those are the people that had been dispossessed. The 10 northern tribes, they'd been moved a long time ago. That had been 150 years earlier. But now Judah and Benjamin and the priests and the Levites, because that's the other people group. So we've actually got 3 tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and the Levites. Even everyone whose spirit God had stirred up to go and rebuild the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. And all those about them encourage them. So, like I said, not everybody's going to go. The people that have their hearts stirred up by the Lord, they go. And the others, notice, encourage them with articles of silver, with gold, with goods, with cattle, with valuables, aside from all that was given as a freewill offering. So they take up offerings to support this movement back to Jerusalem. Verse 7, also King Cyrus brought out the articles of the house of the Lord, these things that had been captured and taken away to Babylon, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and put in the house of his gods. And now Cyrus returns these things so they can also go back, the different furnishings and lampstands and things like that. They can go back to Jerusalem to accompany the return to the rebuilding of the temple. Verse 8, and Cyrus king of Persia had them brought out by the hand of Mithridates the treasurer, and he counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Egypt. Now notice this reference to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. Sheshbazzar, who is Sheshbazzar? Well, there's a few different theories. One puts him as a member of the royal Jewish family and a son of Jehoiachin. And that's been a very popular theory. Another possibility that I hadn't really spent too much time considering was that it's another name for Zerubbabel. After all, every time you see Sheshbazzar, you don't see Zerubbabel, and vice versa. It's a little bit like, well, I'm going to liken it to Superman and Clark Kent. When one shows up, the other isn't to be seen because they're the same person. Maybe. I think there's another possibility. 1 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 18 lists 7 sons of Jehoiachin. One of them is Shenazar, and that could serve as an alternate spelling of Sheshbazzar. That would work, so that would go with our first choice. But another possibility, or maybe it's the same, maybe that this isn't really 2 different things, that it's an uncle of Zerubbabel. And again, that would work too. Which is it? I'm not sure, and we're not going to see him mentioned that often, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. So chapter 1 then gave us the decree of Cyrus that you can all go back, and the ones that don't go back, make sure you support your brothers that are going back. Chapter 2 will be a census of those who return, an actual counting. I'm going to go through all the numbers, but you have an introductory statement. The number of the people of Israel are mentioned, the number of the priests, the number of the Levites who could not give evidence as to their genealogy, and that becomes a problem. We read in chapter 2, verse 59, but they were not able to give evidence of their fathers' households and their descendants, whether they were of Israel. Are they really Jewish or not? And that became an issue. There were also priests who were excluded as unclean. And the final count of the people in the last few verses, the people, the possessions, and the offerings. Chapter 2, verse 64, the whole assembly numbered 42,360. That's a lot of people. But remember, that's not everybody that went back. That's the people that went back. There were a lot more that did not. Besides their male and female servants, who numbered 7,337. Notice we didn't round that off. That's actually an exact number. And they had 200 singing men and women. Their horses were 736. Their mules, 245. Their camels, 435. Their donkeys, 6,720. A lot of donkeys that are used for this. Now, chapter 3 starts off, now when the 7th month came, and the 7th month, remember that their month starts, not, their year doesn't start in January, it starts a few months later. So the 7th month would be around September, roughly, give or take. And when that came, the sons of Israel were in the cities. The people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. Verse 2, then Yeshua, the son of Jehozadak, and his brothers, the priests, and Zerubbabel. So notice we've got Yeshua, he's the high priest. And then Zerubbabel, we're going to call him the governor, the son of Shealtiel. And his brothers arose and built the altar of God, the God of Israel, to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So they come back to the Temple Mount. The temple is still destroyed, but first they're going to build an altar so that they can sacrifice to the Lord and begin the worship that will go on here. They celebrated the Feast of Booths. Now, that wasn't hard to do because the Feast of Booths had people moving out of their homes and into temporary dwellings. Well, right now, all they had was temporary dwellings. So this is going to be easy. And they offered the fixed number of burnt offerings daily according to the ordinance as each day required of it. So they're back in the land. They're living in temporary dwellings. So it's appropriate that the first thing that they celebrate is the Feast of Booths. And they're able now to offer the offerings. Verse 8, now in the 2nd year of their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Yeshua, the son of Jehozadak, and the rest of their brothers, the priests and the Levites, and all who came from the captivity to Jerusalem, began the work and appointed the Levites from 20 years old and over to oversee the work of the house of the Lord. So now they're back in the land. They've got some places to stay. I'm not sure how temporary, how permanent they are. And now they're beginning the work of rebuilding the temple. And so the work begins. We read that old men wept with a loud voice. After all, old men maybe had seen the original temple. They know what's coming. Many shouted aloud for joy. There's excitement. There's weeping. There's all sorts of emotions as they begin the work. And now, chapter 4, the problems begin. Now, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of the exile were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' households and said to them, let us build with you. And you say, wait a second, I thought these were enemies. Well, either they are insincere, but I'm going to give them, maybe I shouldn't, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say they're enemies, but they're going to be enemies, but they weren't that yet. And so they come and they say, let us build with you, for we, like you, seek your God. And we've been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us up here. So these people are not Jewish people. These people had been relocated, and they've come into the land, and they've developed a worship for the Lord, but they've sort of done it as they learned. In some cases, they had a little bit of learning, but in some cases, they made it up and maybe brought some of their I don't want to be mean, but maybe some of their pagan aspects to their sacrifices that had integrated. They're not the people. There are some other people that have been brought in, and they're doing worship that's, hey, they're worshiping the Lord. They're not worshiping a pagan god, But they don't have it quite right. And remember how the northern kingdom of Israel had been taken into captivity for not having it quite right. Remember, they'd had a place of worship to worship the Lord, but at Dan and Bethel with golden calves and things like that. And I'm not saying they had gone that. I don't think they were doing that. But their offer is going to end up, if it's accepted, would radically change the way worship is done at the temple. And so Zerubbabel and Yeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, "You have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God, but we ourselves will together build to the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded." Cyrus had given them the instructions. They were doing it. They were building. And no, we can't have any sort of paganism and remember, it's not strict paganism, but to change the worship of God with any, as you make it up as you go, there's problems there. And so no, we can't do that. That's what got us into trouble in the first place. We got into worshiping alongside Canaanites and other peoples, and then God removed us from the land for doing that. So thank you, but no thank you. Now, I'm not sure quite how tactful they were. You have nothing in common with us in building a house for God. Um, that's a definite no. And so the people of the land now discourage the people of Judah. So now they are becoming enemies if they weren't already, and frightened them from building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their counsel all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Let me just say, there's Cyrus. Darius isn't going to be the next king. There's going to be a king in there in the Persian Empire. So this is going to go on for quite a while. The enmity and those that now are against the work of rebuilding the temple. So, chapter 4 and verse 6 of Ezra. Now, in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And this reference, Ahasuerus, or as the Hebrew says, Ahashyerosh, was close enough. Remember, when you go from one language to another and try to transliterate, you're going to lose a little bit. And so we've done that here as well. Is this a royal title? I have been of the opinion that maybe it is. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, so I'm not going to say this dogmatically, but I see that term Ahasuerus used, I think, of a few different people, which makes me think maybe it's not a name. It could be. Family names also get passed down from father to son, but this might be a title. In Ezra, in the next verse, and in the days of Artaxerxes, well, that's a different name. Artaxerxes, Bishlam, Mithredath, Tabael, and the rest of his colleagues wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia. So notice we'd had Cyrus before, but now we've got Artaxerxes, or Artasharshita. That's again, you lose a little bit in translation. The Artaxerxes is the way we've translated the term from its Greek spelling. And notice, so they're going to write a letter, and the text of the letter was written in Aramaic and translated from Aramaic. So we're going to switch to Aramaic to read it as we do this. Now we're going to stick with our English translation. Let me see. I can work my way through Hebrew. Aramaic sometimes it always gives me problems. It's a related language, but it's not exactly the same. So is this another name for Cambyses? Cambyses is going to be the name by which we know the son of Cyrus, who comes immediately after Cyrus's death and before Darius. So is that, or is this the title? Again, I'm not sure. Chapter 4, verse 23. Then as soon as the copy of King Artaxerxes' document was read before Rehum and Shimshai, the scribe, and their colleagues, they went in haste to Jerusalem to the Jews and stopped them by force of arms. Then the work of the house of God in Jerusalem ceased, and it was stopped until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. We have Cyrus the Great had given them permission to rebuild, and they had gone and begun to do that. But then, and by the time it stops, we actually have Cyrus that has died, and his son Cambyses, that's how we know him, at least with his Greek name, Under Cambyses, the construction is halted, and it stays halted for a number of years until two prophets arise, and they are going to be Haggai and Zechariah. They're going to get up. We're going to read this right now. They'll prophesy and urge construction to begin again. Chapter 5, verse 1, when the prophets Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Edu prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, who was over them. So notice who prophesies: Haggai and Zechariah. And you say, what do they say? Well, when we get to the end of the Old Testament, we're going to see the book of Haggai and we're going to see the book of Zechariah, and we'll actually read their prophecies. They are contemporary with each other. They're almost a little bit like ministry partners, but their approach is going to be very different, but the message will be the same. The message is, listen up for God. Listen to him. There will be prophecies, there'll be warnings, and one of the messages that will come loud and clear, especially in the case of Haggai: start rebuilding the temple. And so as they do that, verse 2, then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Yeshua, the son of Jehozadak, so that you've got the governor and the high priest, and they arose and began to rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. So everybody gets back on the same page. They pick up again and begin rebuilding, but remember, they don't have permission from the Persian authorities, where they had been told to stop, to cease and desist, and now they are moving forward without a building permit. So we've got a problem. The work on the temple had stopped back in chapter 4, verse 24. Haggai and Zechariah prophesy, and now the work begins again, but without permission. It won't be long, chapter 5, verse 3, at that time, Tateni, the governor of the province beyond the river, and Shethar-bozenai and their colleagues came to them and spoke to them, who issued you a decree to rebuild this temple and to finish the structure? Where's your building permit? Then we told them accordingly of what the names of the men who were reconstructing this building. They're not trying to hide it. They're saying, we're doing it. We're doing it. We've got a higher authority. They don't go into that right now. Verse 5, but the eye of their God was on the elders of the Jews, and they did not stop them until a report could come to Darius, and then a written reply be returned concerning it. So instead of ceasing and desist, they allow them to continue, but they're sending a report to Darius, and the report says, hey, these guys are building without a permit. Did you want to stop that? What do you want us to do? But notice in the interim, and it takes a long time, they don't have internet or telephone, so it's going to take a long time for a report to go all the way to the heart of the Persian Empire, and for a reply from Darius to come all the way back. So the letter is written to the Persian emperor, and the question is, what's going to happen? A letter is going to be written from the Persian emperor back in reply, and in the meantime, the work goes on. Now, we had the construction halted, the work started again, and Darius, he's going to give permission for them to complete it. But here's how it's going to happen. He has an investigation made. And in the investigation, it comes out that Cyrus had first given permission, and he says, oh, not my grandfather, my distant cousin, because Darius, he's part of the same extended family, but there had been a family break. And so he says, oh, my distant cousin Cyrus said that they could rebuild it. In that case, they can. And chapter 6, verse 8, the full cost is to be paid to these people from the royal treasury out of the taxes of the provinces beyond the river, and that without delay. So not only can they continue rebuilding, but we're going to help finance it. Now, not out of our treasury, out of their treasury, it's out of their taxes. They get a tax break for continuing this work. But they get a tax break is now endorsed by the Persian Empire. And so Tateni, the governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-bozenai, and their colleagues carried out the decree with all diligence, just as King Darius had sent. That's chapter 6, verse 13. And so the elders of the Jews were successful in building through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Edu, and they finished building according to the command of the God of Israel. and the decree of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes, he's going to come quite a bit later, king of Persia. And this temple was completed on the third day of the month Adar. It was the 6th year of the reign of the king. So we begin, remember the temple had been destroyed, 586 BC. It is completed now in 516 BC, 70 years after it had been destroyed. So the 70-year captivity is from the destruction of the temple to its completed rebuilding. Now, that was the book of Ezra, or chapters 1 through 6 at least. We had the return under Zerubbabel, the rebuilding of the temple. Now, because the book's not finished, chapters 7 through 10, we're going to flash forward about 55 years. And the rest of the story is going to be the second story, will be the return of another group, this time under Ezra, and they're going to restore. They'd been worshiping, but they hadn't been doing everything quite right. Remember, there'd been some outside help, and they turned that down to their credit, but still some outside things have happened in the interim. And so the worship will now need to be restored. Now, big picture of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Notice we had the first return under Zerubbabel, the rebuilding of the temple. That starts around 538 BC. The temple is completed by 516 BC, 70 years after it had been destroyed. 586 BC it had been destroyed. 516, now it's completed. The next thing that we see in the Bible, but notice it's not in chronological order in the Bible, are the events of the book of Esther taking place around, most of them, around 473 BC. Now that's the latter part of the book. It actually starts a bit earlier than that, but that'll still work for us. And then Ezra chapter 7 is going to begin around 458 BC. That's a long time later. 458 to 457 BC, and that's going to be the rest of the book of Ezra. And then when we turn to the page and start in Nehemiah, we're going to flash forward about 10 years, a little bit over that. There'll be a third return where Nehemiah is going to bring some people back as well, and he will oversee rebuilding the walls of the city. Temple's already there by his time, but now rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. So just in the same way we had 3 deportations, now we have 3 returns back to the land. Now, some variations on his name, because we need to talk about Ezra, who gave the title to this book, but also is the name of one of the characters here. Ezra is a shortened form of Azariah. It just means the Lord has helped, that Ezra is to help, and the Ayah part is the short for the name of God. In Greek, you write Esdras, and the Greek Septuagint actually has this name, and they changed the title of, well, not only do they change the title of the book, they also add some other apocryphal books, trying to tell more stories and more additions to the book. I think we're not going to talk about those. I don't hold them to be authoritative. They may give us a few interesting stories, but I don't spend much time with the book of Esdras. Ezra chapter 1 then, chapter 7, beginning in verse 1. Now after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, so we flash forward past the rest of Darius and past Xerxes, and now to Artaxerxes, there went up Ezra, son of Sariah, son of Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Shallum, son of Zadok, son of Ahitub, son of Amariah, son of Azariah, son of Merioth, son of Zariah, son of Uzi, son of Buki, son of Abishah, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the chief priest. In case you didn't get that, that's to show his credentials, that Ezra can trace his genealogy all the way back to Aaron. So we have Ezra, who is a priest, but in verse 6, we're going to find out this Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a scribe. So he is both scribe and priest. Those two professions did not normally go together. A priest, his job was to do sacrifices and offerings and things like that to represent the people to God. A scribe was a man of learning. He could read the scriptures, as being able to read, could read and write, maybe to copy the scriptures, but also to read them. And as a scripture reader, he would be reading the scriptures to the people. One goes from the people to God, the other goes from God, or the writings, whatever they are, to the people. And notice he's skilled in the law of Moses, which the Lord God of Israel had given, and the king granted him all he requested because the hand of the Lord his God was upon him. Verse 7, some of the sons of Israel and some of the priests, the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants went up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes, and he came to Jerusalem, presumably with that group, in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. So notice we've got sons of Israel, we've got priests, we've got Levites, we've got singers, we've got gatekeepers, we've got temple servants, and they're all headed to Jerusalem. Now, for the first of the first month, he began to go up from Babylon, and on the first of the 5th month, it takes him 5 months to get there. That's a long way, going from Persia all the way. You're walking all the way past Mesopotamia and all the way to Jerusalem. And he came up to Jerusalem, again, because the good hand of his God was upon him. Do you notice that as the refrain? We've already seen that line, and it's going to be given again and again and again, giving credit to God to bring all these things to pass. So first month he leaves, 5th month they arrive. For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to practice it and to teach. So notice he is studying. Studying is good, but if you don't practice it, it's not much good. In other words, not just to study it and know about it, but then to do that which is written. And then furthermore, to teach his statutes and ordinances in Israel. So Ezra is both a priest. I'm going to call him something of a pastor teacher in that sense. Now, he's got some letters, and we have the letter of Artaxerxes, chapter 7, verses 12 through 26, where there's permission for Ezra and his companions to travel. Next, they're given tax-free silver, where along the way, the different governors that they pass by their jurisdictions do not have permission to take their share. It's to go from Ezra in Persia all the way untouched to Jerusalem. So tax-free silver, gold, temple utensils, supplies for the journey, and the authority to appoint magistrates and judges over the Jews. Doesn't mean he has authority over any other part of the empire, but the Jews in Jerusalem, he is given official authority. Now, Ezra chapter 8 is a list of those who came with Ezra. Verses 15 through 20 call for the Levites to join. There's fasting and prayer for the journey. Offerings are entrusted to priests and Levites for the journey. And finally, they get there and they faithfully deliver the funds and the edicts. Now, what's important is the funds, because, sometimes people can be tempted to take a little bit of a tithe or offering or share from that. And what we see here, chapter 8, verse 32, thus we came to Jerusalem and remained there 3 days. On the 4th day, the silver and the gold and the utensils were weighed out in the house of our God into the hand of Merimoth, the son of Uriah the priest, and with him was Eleazar the son of Phinehas, and with them were the Levites, Jozabad the son of Yeshua, and Noadiah the son of Benui. Everything was numbered and weighed, and all the weight was recorded at that time. Do you see the attention to detail, the attention to accountability? And can I say that Christians need accountability? So some thoughts on this. A system of checks and balances was in effect. And so that nobody shaved off a little gold, took a little, oh gee, that can go into my retirement fund. Um, there were records kept, and all the valuables were counted before they left Persia, and then they were counted once they arrived. Churches need that too. Church, and I know my church is very careful about that accountability, about having people that oversee the records, people that are trustworthy, both in finances, in our leaders, and individually too. We need accountability, to be accountable to one another. We're all accountable to God, but He has deputized us, in a sense, to take that accountability to one to another as well. And it should be in our churches, and it should be in our personal lives as well. Now, chapters 7 and 8 of Ezra, notice we've got Ezra's return to Jerusalem with the Jews. That's summarized for us in verses 1 through 10. We have the king's blessing on the trip and the gifts of gold and silver for the temple. Ezra gathers the leading men to prepare for the return. There's a list of those who returned, and he now gathers the key people at the river to do that returning. The Jews fast and pray for God's blessings on the trip and the care for the king's gifts of gold and silver for the temple. And finally, they return to Jerusalem with the Jews. There's that accountability, and they offer the proper sacrifices to the Lord. That's the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9, now there's another problem. How can there be another problem? Well, when these things had been completed, the princes approached me, saying, and here it comes, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands. Remember how they'd, back in the days of Zerubbabel, they'd said, "Oh, we want to help," and "Oh, no, we need to be on our own," and that had created hostility. But that was 50-something years ago, and now there's quite a lengthy time, and now some of that has taken place. Notice they've not separated themselves from the people of the lands according to their abominations, and now he's going to list the different peoples of the land that are involved. The Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. And so we've got all sorts of folk that are having their practices, sometimes their religious practices, integrate in an unhealthy way with the people of the land. I've used the illustration before. When you take a white glove and you stick it in the mud rarely becomes glovey. It's the glove that becomes muddy. And that's what was happening here. The worship is being diluted and changed and rendered unclean. Verse 2, for they have taken some of their daughters as wives for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy race has intermingled with the peoples of the land. Indeed, the hands of the princes and the rulers have been foremost in this unfaithfulness. They've been taking foreign wives, and with foreign wives come foreign gods, and with foreign gods become, they haven't taken that either ethnic or, in this case, religious um, uh, cleanliness to mind. So they've engaged in this sort of thing, and the people of God are no longer continuing to be the people of God. And notice this intermingling with peoples of the lands. Now, it's one thing when you had people like Rahab that said, "We're going to be with your God," or Ruth, "Your God's going to be my God," but that's not what had been taking place. So it is in danger of going back to, in fact, it's even worse perhaps, going back to what the Israelites had done, the people of Judah had done, to be taken away into captivity. Are we really going to go through that again? And so notice the princes and the rulers, as go the rulership, so go the rest of the people. And they were they weren't the ones holding anybody back. They were actually endorsing and engaging in this sort of thing themselves. Now, chapter 9, we have the problem, intermarriage with people of the land, I think both physically but also spiritually. Ezra speaks in this chapter in the first person. He says, "I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that." And he goes in to the temple and he offers a prayer. Remember, he's a priest, so he can do this. He goes into the temple and he offers a prayer of repentance. Now, while he's in the temple, meanwhile, there's some activity going on outside as they come up with a solution. And the solution is to divorce those wives. And Ezra comes out. Now he's described now in the third person. He does this, not I do this. So somebody else is telling us the story. And the proposal is of divorce. And that's going to be carried out. Let's look at that. 10 verse 1, now while Ezra was praying and making confession, weeping and prostrating himself before the house of God, a very large assembly, men, women, and children gathered to him from Israel, for the people wept bitterly. Apparently he was praying for quite some time in the temple. Outside the temple, Shechaniah, the son of Yehiel, one of the sons of Elam, said to Ezra, and he's going to come up with an action plan. We have been unfaithful to our God and have married foreign women from the peoples of the land. That's true. Yet now there is hope for Israel in spite of this. There's a way out of this problem. It's drastic. Make no mistake about that. It is a drastic movement that he proposes, but he proposes a plan. And Ezra's going to hear this. Verse 3, now let us make a covenant with our God to put away all the wives and their children. Now, what is putting away? That's called divorce. So the plan is Operation Divorce, according to the counsel of my Lord and of those who tremble at the commandment of our God, and let it be done according to the law. Arise, for this matter is your responsibility, but we will be with you. Be courageous and act. So you determine. Here's the plan. We're proposing it to you, but but it is extreme. But be courageous and act. And so notice it's according to the law that they're doing it. They're not breaking God's law. The law had a stipulation about divorce, and they're going to do this legally, even though this is a harsh thing. Verse 5, then Ezra rose and made the leading priests, the Levites, and all Israel take oath that they would do this according to this proposal. So they took the oath. And so this becomes a covenant connection here with the taking of the oath. Now, chapter 9, we had seen the problem of intermarriage introduced back in chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. The people would gather on Ezra. He sits in distress over the problem. He kneels in prayer in the temple, and we see this extended temple prayer. And then when he comes out, they've come up with a solution, and the solution is called divorce. We just read that. Ezra arises from prayer in the temple. He comes out and he hears it. He gathers the people. They sit in distress. And notice that the actual language is the same. As the representatives, they sit over the problem and they look at that. And the problem now is resolved. A investigation. That's not the end of the chapter. The chapter goes on. It's going to list all the people. It's going to list those that were involved. There will be an extensive list of those who have taken foreign wives. And everybody agrees except for a tiny minority. You mentioned this in verse 15. Only Jonathan, the son of Asahel, and Zahaziah, the son of Tikvah, opposed this, with Meshullam and Shabbatai, the Levites, supporting them. So just a couple of voices saying they didn't want to do this. And we're not told the merits. We're not told, which was right, which was wrong. The book is going to end sort of unresolved. And so oftentimes I'll bring this up as a discussion question. Who was right? Who was wrong? Just because it's the majority doesn't make it right. And yet, we can look at this and see all of the various facets involved in the argument. Some concluding thoughts now on the subject of divorce. First of all, let me just say divorce involves cutting off that which is meant to be whole, and that means divorce is always a bad thing. Now, I didn't say never do it. Let me say amputation is a bad thing, to cut off an arm. Sometimes it has to be done, but that's because there was a worse thing if you allowed it to remain. And divorce is like that. It's always a bad thing, but sometimes it is necessary. Jesus says in Mark chapter 10, verse 9, whatever God has joined together, let no man separate. We have Malachi chapter 2, verse 16, where God says, I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel, and him who covers his garment with wrong, says the Lord of hosts. So take heed to your spirit that you do not deal treacherously. Make sure you're not dealing treacherously if you find yourself needing to move into that area of divorce. Secondly, I want you to see in Ezra's case, this amputation was seen by the people as necessary for Israel's spiritual survival. Now the question is, were they right or were they wrong? But it was seen by Ezra and the vast majority. Remember, there was a majority view, a minority view, but it was seen as necessary. There's times when separation or divorce is a painful necessity. Sometimes it happens. We live in a fallen world. Bad things happen. That does not necessarily endorse a remarriage to a different partner especially if you were the guilty party. Now, if you were the innocent party, I think that's actually some things that are written in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 that say, yes, divorce and remarriage is a possibility there. That's a case of divorce for unfaithfulness, and like I said, the innocent party, because they are innocent, they're not bound. In that case, I'm using the language of Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Next, we see that the New Testament addresses the question of an unequal marriage. What happens when somebody's married to an unbeliever? Um, Again, we're told in the scriptures, don't do that. If you're a Christian, don't go marrying a non-Christian. But if you find that that has taken place, or maybe there were two unbelievers, and one of them heard the gospel and believed and became a Christian. So however it took place, now you're in that unequal marriage. We are told, first of all, don't enter into such a marriage. So if you're single, don't marry an unbeliever. Don't automatically, though, seek to end such a marriage. Again, 1 Corinthians chapter 7 gives us some instructions. Stay married. Now, if that person wants to leave, if they want a divorce, then okay, let them go. But and don't try to drive them away. Try to maintain the marriage. So if it does end through no fault of your own, then you are free, but don't go seeking to end the marriage on your own. If you are then single, let me say, you have an option. Get married or stay single. That's easy. If you're single, you can always change your mind and get married. If you're married, don't change your mind. If you are married, but we said if you're single, only get married to a Christian. But if you're married, you're called to stay married. Or if that's not possible, then if you bring about the divorce, remain single. Unless you were that innocent party, or that remember somebody wants to leave and you don't try to keep them there. Um, if the spouse is a Christian, stay married or be reconciled. And I've actually known this to happen on a number of occasions where two people, they had troubles, they divorced, they stayed single, and then they came back and married each other again. And that was a win. And I look at today, some very happy marriages, but that was the route that was taken to get there.